Welcome to the Lean by Design podcast. I'm your host, Lawrence Wong, and my co-host is Oscar Gonzalez. We meet with biotech, pharma, and other industry leaders to explore the relationship between people and workflow design. Join us as they tell inspiring stories that have shaped their careers and deliver practical tips to help you work smarter and become lean by design. All right, let's kick off episode 1 by interviewing my co-host, Oscar Gonzalez. Oscar has been in life sciences for over a decade. He began his career working in labs at various academic institutions, including the Wake Forest University School of Medicine, Eastern Virginia Medical School, and Boston University. Shortly after moving to the Boston area, Oscar transitioned into the industry by taking on roles of increasing responsibility at Karyopharm Therapeutics and LifeMind Therapeutics. He has designed workflows for R&D functions, academic labs, finance, human resources, and clinical operations. Oscar earned his MBA at the Questrom School of Business, master's degree in bioimaging at the BU School of Medicine, and bachelor's degree in biology at Longwood University. He also holds a Lean Six Sigma Black Belt and is the CEO of Sigma Lab Consulting. Oscar, welcome to the show.
Hello. I am excited to finally get started with episode number 1. It's one of those things that's you think about all the time, and you have a lot of activities that you want to get started on. But it's good to actually start recording, and we've already seen the fun in trying to have everything set up appropriately.
Yeah, we've had a flurry of technical difficulties before recording our first episode. All right, so I guess we'd like to kind of start at the most recent event, right? Which is, I think for both of us, we've recently made the transition from working from an employer to becoming full-time at our consulting business. So, what's been the biggest surprise for you as you're working full-time as CEO?
When I sit back and I look at it, it's been a couple years since we have been building, the framework for what we wanted to do with Sigma Lab Consulting. And when I think about the journey, it's a lot like when you become a homeowner, when you have a mortgage and you have bills and you have dishes to clean and you have a child to clean up after. And, there's all these, you always hear about the great things about being a homeowner, but then you forget to realize there's all of these other activities that you are responsible for. It's not your mother. It's not the apartment complex. It's not your landlord. It is you. If something breaks, you fix it. And, I think when I go over all of these different aspects of being a business owner, it really showed me very much how to be flexible. You're going to do a lot of research, and, we both went to a great school that provided us the proper education to launch this expedition, I guess you can say. And you still have some of those things lacking because, it just depends on what industry you're in, depends on what your market is going to be, depends on the type of company that you want to start. But there's just so many layers to owning a business that you really don't hear about, especially in school. And, more recently was the notion of your business having credit. I don't think that I've heard at any point in time during our education about having credit for your business. And it makes complete sense. But when you're so focused on what is my end game, what is my, where is my market? How am I going to reach out to them? How are my services going to be? Is my pitch deck polished? The last thing you're thinking about is, does my company have credit? How do I get my company credit for, long-term, investments or financing that you may need to have? So there's so many little nuances that you don't you don't typically have those conversations in an MBA program that just kind of jumped out. And it's a surprise, but there's so much information out there. And we've been fortunate enough to connect with some resources that are not capital intensive, such as using Score Boston and matching with sort of a business coach, a mentor that is really helping pose questions to us so that we are certain of the next move, that we are assuring ourselves that, yeah, that's exactly what we want to do. She's posing questions to us that, push us to certain ways where we have to go back and research and then come back to her and let her know what we found out and let her know what our decisions were. And, having that kind of support is also something that's really important that I don't think you talk too much about. But it's just, learning every day and trying to take every, oopsies in stride while we're trying to get, our company off the ground.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And when we spent our time at Question, I think there was a lot of focus around the traditional sources of funding, which is typically either venture backed or you go to your family and friends and you ask for some money to fund your venture. But there are other sources of non-traditional sources of funding that you can do that we've kind of explored to fund our operation. So with that being said, I mean, there's definitely a lot of, I would say, moving parts and just adjusting to working for yourself as a business owner. What do you do when you get overwhelmed with all these different types of requests that come in or things that you forgot to do and things start to pile up and what's a priority, what's not? How do you handle that?
It's a lot because you want to dedicate all of this time to your clients, but at the same time, you have to make sure that you're driving the company in the direction that's healthy. You need to make sure that, you're still, once you start the company and you start working with a client, there's things that are still happening in the background, such as in our case, making sure that our, payroll is being processed appropriately, making sure that our invoices are being sent and received, through the systems that we're using, health insurance and figuring out the best dental insurance, for the two of us. And so, there's all of these, I don't want to call them distractions, but from the client, they are distractions. And so I've been trying to, now I'm fully remote, so I'm fully at home, and I'm trying to, get up, take that hour, that 45 minutes to an hour that I used to spend driving into the city and coming right downstairs and start working on company related items. Let me go back and review that contract. Let me, polish up this contract so that I can send it to the client or to the next guest of our podcast. And, finding that time during the day is something that I choose to try to stay away from. So, essentially from, 9 to 5 and to 6, just depending, I really want to focus on what are the things that I need to do for my client. So, I have a big dry erase board that's completely mapped out with things. And, I'm, instead of planning, week to week when I was working at one organization for myself, for that organization, I have been planning, 3-4 weeks out, making sure that all my calendars are up to date. And that's really what's most important, because I need to understand where would I have a conflict? Where am I going to have a conflict where a client needs me to be present somewhere, but I have another client that also needs me to be present? How do I go through those things and make sure that I'm providing the service that was explicitly written within the contract? So it's a lot of lists, a lot of scheduling, but similar to how, we want to plan our projects and these initiatives, it's the planning. So you plan, you execute, plan, and you execute. And I think really spending the time to, even at the end of the day, just yesterday, which was Friday for us, just yesterday, I sat back, and at the end of the day, I took in probably another 20, 30 minutes. And I said, okay, what am I expecting on Monday and Tuesday of the following week for my clients and for my company? What are the things that I need to carry out? And what are the things that I need to follow up on? So because of that, it allows me to clear my mind. Between that and the dry erase board, our brains have a certain capacity to remember and to retain information. And when you have a lot of these short-term items that are just kind of clouding, have you ever been in a situation where you feel so busy and you're so stressed out, and then when you start to write down a list, you're like, it's only like 3 or 4 things. Like, it's not that. Have you had that happen before?
Yeah, no, absolutely, you're right, and your mind has a definitely a limited capacity in being able to plan things in logical order, and
Yes.
I imagine my mind is just a ball of yarn with a bunch of things that I need to do, but to write things down, you kind of have to lay those things out and then prioritize based on what it is that is actually important and what things can be put off. And yeah, I always find myself questioning, okay, well, is that priority actually my priority, or is that somebody else's priority? And then you're able to kind of put things on the back burner or just refuse those types of requests and say, okay, I need to focus on, A, B, and C before I do those things for other people.
And that's a super important distinction for, understanding what are the things that I have to do now. There's things that I have to remember to do. And if that's the case, and I'm afraid that I'm going to miss it, I just set up a Google task reminder, set a reminder, because why? I am looking at my email on my phone all the time because people are sending email, people are sending messages through, LinkedIn, through, the corporate, Teams accounts that we're working on. And so even just something as simple as that of, let me just set this reminder, because then it just completely takes it out of your head. And you don't have to say, you don't have to have those moments of, oh, wait a minute, there was something I was supposed to do. Instead, you're already known, you've captured it. Like, there was something that I need to do in a couple of days, but I set an alert so it comes to me, 2 days before, and then I can execute on it. So it really gives you kind of this, it really alleviates what's really bottled up in your mind. And so, I found that's really what has allowed me to kind of navigate, because it can become quite a bit. And don't get me wrong, the first couple days, I thought to myself, oh boy, did Oscar bite off more than he can chew? And I can't stress this enough, that it's, communicating with your business partner, communicating with your clients, communicating with yourself, putting notes down and talking through things. If you're working from home, you don't have colleagues. I have my wife that I can bounce things off of, but even to her, I don't want to go in there and download on her everything that's going on in my head, because can sometimes be very crazy in my head, and I don't need to add that stress to my wife. So, but it just, even being able to take kind of notes of like, this is where things are going to be going, is I think really, really helpful. You're listening to Lean by Design podcast, and we'll be right back after a quick break. Thank you to our sponsor, Lauren Perna Communications, a Boston-based digital communications firm for life sciences, healthcare, and mental health companies. Life science companies have an important story, but it's not always easy with the industry jargon. Lauren and her team turn your technical talk into compelling content that feels authentic to your brand and resonates with your audience. If you need help with your digital content or copywriting, visit laurenperna.com to learn more about how they can tell your company's story.
Yeah, I think, this, the discipline that it takes to, be that self-aware and to prioritize those tasks. Do you think that is something that you've learned over time, or was that something that you really learned early on in your career, or maybe before that?
Oh, absolutely not. I was the worst with time management. And, I like to always blame this on being late to events when I was younger, that I just always was, kind of just behind. And, what I used to do is actually not even take any notes. I would just kind of shut things down and, call it a day and say, okay, I'll come back to it. And I would, forget, appointments that I set. I would forget what homework I had to do. I really think that it was after college is when this started to really be a thing for me to write down a lot of notes, for me to write down a lot of for me, I can't deal with a lot of sticky notes. Usually my sticky notes that I have are like login information or identifying information. The clients that I work with, they have a lot of acronyms and I need to memorize some more than others. So I'll have those kind of available so that I can just use that as like a reference. Usually when I'm writing down notes, I have an iPad for it because I have notes for the house, for the company, for one client, for the other client, for things that I'm building because I'm a novice, woodworker, in my spare time. And, that stuff, it really came with time because I didn't really value, for one, I didn't value taking notes and actually reviewing them again. I was under this guise that as long as I could write it down, I could remember things. So I'd write things down and just tuck that away. So it really was, post college when I think when I really wanted to make the change to get into grad school. And I knew that the way that I was trying to retain information was not productive and it was not allowing me to really understand what I was learning. And I had to find a different pathway for that. And that pathway was taking these notes and reflecting on them and going back and taking notes ahead of time. What do I see happening? How can I prepare myself? I needed to offload things. And that was the only thing that I could think about doing. Some people, they like to take a recorder and say, reminder, blah, 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 watermelons, bananas, bread, whatever grocery list kind of thing. I'm a writer. I will handwrite. I have a list. And it's just really helped me kind of step back and say, what are all the things that I have in this space, in this space, in this space? And then to your point, how do I prioritize that for the amount of time that I have to work on them? How difficult is it? How important is it? Do I need this to go to someone else after me? So that might be something I need to prioritize because it has to go to another layer of review. A lot of those little things, they just over time started to really build. And I think I really started to hone in the ability to manage a lot of different things when I started my roles at Carrier Farm, because my role became one as a program manager. That role became one that I have to kind of know what everyone's doing. So I had a dry erase board. I had a lot of notes, and that's a lot to know what you have to do and then also know what everyone else has to do as well.
Yeah, I think for myself, even early on in your career, you have maybe a set amount of responsibility. So you may, maybe use a notebook, you write a couple of notes down, you have a couple of tasks. But I think over time, as you climb the ladder or get increasing responsibility, it's no longer sustainable that you just write a bunch of stuff on Post-its, right? So one thing that's helped on my end is I discovered OneNote maybe, I don't know, 5 years ago. Yep. And that's been a huge help in making checklists and following up on specific tasks. So I thought, you mentioned, learning these things, kind of coming out of college and working at maybe your first job in the lab. Through my searches of the internet, there was a name that was mentioned on the website, and I wanted to get your thought on what this person meant to you. Dr. Don Merkel.
Yeah. Dr. Merkel came, he was one of my college professors. I actually had him for 2 classes. I had him for anatomy and physiology at Longwood University when I was doing my undergrad, and evolution. He had some challenging courses. especially anatomy and physiology. I think that was a class of like 150 people. And, you sort of feel lost a little bit. You're kind of sitting in there and there's just so many students in there. And, for me, I was coming off of a freshman year that I did okay. I definitely did not have the GPA that I kind of just coasted through in high school, because I tried to do the same exact thing I did in high school. And that did not include studying. It really just included, like I was mentioning before, taking notes and then putting the notebook away and then rolling out for the exam. And that didn't work. And I learned that in that first year. And it, as you're aware, and many people that have gone to college, it's very hard to bring up your GPA once you have kind of hit a little bit of a lull. And with Dr. Merkel, he was, he passed away not too long ago from glioblastoma, and which happened to be a disease that I worked on when I was at Wake Forest doing research over there. And so it kind of hit me in a couple different angles, but he was someone that, just had such a passion for the science and such a passion to teach people. And it, you never felt like this person knows they're smarter than me and they're making me look like an idiot. I've had some professors where I sit there and I go, why would you torture someone to do this? And then, you basically tell us, well, this is what separates people that go to med school versus the ones that don't. And it doesn't feel good from the perspective of a student. Like, yeah, I'm going to really do great in this school. No, in this class, it's no, not at all. But, Dr. Merkel had this kind of jovial personality, and, he was a shorter, rounder fella, bald on the top, cul-de-sac hair with glasses. So kind of like your little mad scientist kind of looking guy. But just smiles ear to ear all the time, and just such a good, such a beacon of, this is science, this is what I love, and I want to teach you what I enjoy. And so it almost felt like when you were in his classes, you were his colleague. And so, it affected me when he passed, probably more than I actually thought it would. Because, when you have those kinds of relationships with teachers, with professors, it's not like you get to see them every day. So I was a little surprised that, I had the kind of, I don't know what layer of grieving you want to put, but it was, when I saw that, I thought, you know what, you can still have fun. You can still, make light of science and be a jovial person and still be serious about what you want to do. And that's kind of what I grasped, because you sort of get this like, well, scientists, they're very serious. You got to, these are experiments. And the more that I saw that in him was, that really put me in a state of mind of, I want to be this jovial person. I want to show people the real me. I don't want to try to hide it just because science is a profession, being a scientist and working at biotech and pharma, it's hard. Science is hard. And if we can't laugh at ourselves, if we can't enjoy the time that we're there, it's not going to be fun. And for me, science is so much fun. I love science. And, I always try to bring that into, any of the places that I've been working in, try to bring that into the workplaces with my clients that, hey guys, this is hard. Like, we can laugh at this. We can, we can cry at it. I know a lot of people that have cried over science, but, that's really, it was his personality and being that type of professor that really stuck with me.
Yeah, I can definitely see how some of those traits that you mentioned as him as an educator has kind of rubbed off on you, and that idea of approaching work with a kind of fun mentality and to understand not everything has to be 100% serious, and yes, we have to get things done, but at the same time, you got to make this enjoyable, because people are dedicating most of their time, and if not their day, most of their life working, right? and to be serious 100% of the time and not to bring your authentic self to work it just doesn't seem like a very sustainable practice.
Yeah, I mean, I can't agree with you more. It's, we all know what we're trying to do. We're trying to save lives. We're trying to, bring back better lives for people. Maybe we won't necessarily find a cure, but if somebody has a couple of extended years, this stuff is hard and it's stressful and you can easily take everything to heart. So you got to, put your personality into it and the successes will come, when they're meant to. I truly believe that. You're listening to Lean by Design podcast, and we'll be right back after a quick break. Do you suspect your life sciences company could do things more efficiently? Maybe you're seeing costly workflow issues, or maybe the work feels more difficult to perform than necessary, affecting team morale. If any of this resonates, reach out to the team at Sigma Lab Consulting for a free consultation on how we can develop and launch a custom solution fit for your team. Our consultants will build a custom workflow solution for your team to reach peak efficiency. Find out more at www.sigmalabconsulting.com.
Yeah. So let's kind of shift gears and talk a little bit about workflow design, right? So I think there are elements of some of the things that you had mentioned there. And what do you think are common mistakes people typically make in designing a process?
Oh man, common mistakes. Woof. Well, I'm going to kind of back up a little bit. And I think one of the features of workflows and how they're built and how they're managed, you see differences in organizations that have turnover versus organizations that may have a little bit more stability, which are usually attributed to larger companies that have employees over 10 years, over 12 years, 15, 20, 30 years. When you have these other organizations where you may have turnovers within 2 years or within 3 years, it's very common. It is very common. But the crux of that is that you have individuals coming in and they're going to want to make an adjustment based on how they see their new department working. They're going to want to, I have a best practice. Let's do this. Let's do this. And instead of really taking apart a full project, a full workflow, these organizations are taking one component of the workflow and saying, we're going to optimize this space right here. Now, if you can imagine a chain of trains and you want to take out the third one and change that from the big one that it is to one that is carrying logs. Well, we don't even know what the output is on the train before that, on the trailer before that, and what the input is for the trailer after that. So essentially we're taking these different rectangular processes, and then we're replacing one of them with a triangle. And so unless you're actually looking at the full workflow, you're now crafting a solution that may not be what's going to solve the problem. So, I've been in a position where we had a full workflow, and part of it was that we had to outsource material to have it processed. Well, the bottleneck was frequently given to us that it was the analysis at the end of that. So we'd receive the data, we go to analysis, and that's the bottleneck. Our next move was that we purchased an expensive piece of equipment to process samples. Now, that does help some of the workflow because now we don't have to ship things out. However, we did nothing to address at that time the analysis portion of it. So what ended up happening was that we were still continuing to have a bottleneck. After spending all this money on this new piece of equipment, we still had a bottleneck because we came in, changed the workflow in a space that was not determined to be the bottleneck, was not determined to be the causal factor there. And I think that's what really affects our workflows when we're trying to design, appropriately. We have to look at the whole thing. We can't just look at one piece of that workflow to fully understand what is the best solution for this.
Yeah, it's definitely the mentality of it's not just about you, and you got to think about the people that are upstream and downstream of you, so you don't hand them something that they actually can't work with, and to understand what kind of struggles the people that are giving those inputs to you and what they're dealing with as well.
Exactly.
I guess the other part of it I want to kind of touch on is how do you decide how the boundaries will work for the process, right? Because you could go way downstream and think about the last person who's going to be dealing with the whatever data, and then you can go way upstream to think about the raw material or whatever it is that you need for your process. So how do you draw that line of, okay, this is what I'm going to focus on, and to keep it at that, and not have scope creep and things kind of trickle into the process where they shouldn't belong?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's everyone's going to have their own way of doing things. For me, the just downstream and just upstream are the absolute most important that have to be taken into consideration. Now, with that being said, I'm going to tell you this political answer. It depends on the workflow you're trying to fix. If you are a Ford line and you're building F-150s and all of a sudden you want to put Lamborghini doors, well, the workflow to actually add the hinges may be on step 2. So now you have to go all the way to step 2 to make an adjustment to there, because instead of having, a regular side door, now you want to put a Lamborghini door. So this is what I'm trying to kind of put together, is that, it does depend on your workflow. However, the most immediate, upstream and downstream, those have to be taken into consideration. Because, for example, if you change a workflow and you say, okay, now we have an output that has, so much throughput, but then in your next stage, you do nothing to increase the ability to process the new high throughput of those samples, it really doesn't do you any good. You just end up with a lot of data that you actually don't have the time to process.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. So, for this first round, I know we're coming up on time. So before we close, is there anything that you want to bring to the audience, and any requests, any things that we didn't cover?
I think I am such a big proponent of doing things wisely. I scratch my head, I question a lot, and it's never out of disrespect. It's usually it's mostly out of trying to understand, do we find this to be okay? Do we believe that spending this much time to do XYZ is fine? If not, let's fix it. We are on a race to develop so many medicines and services and curatives and to solve these problems that we're dealing with every day. And the fact that we don't want to do after action reviews, the fact that we just want to do things the way that we have always known them to be done, we're eliminating opportunity for innovation. And innovation doesn't necessarily mean buying a new piece of equipment, getting more people. Sometimes it just means reworking the current workflow that you have. That's being innovative. Hey, instead of this step, we can actually combine these 2 steps into one, and that eliminates, travel time, or that eliminates, handoff, that can actually cause additional error. We have to really, be mindful of, these other things that we can do. If your machines are not operating at a capacity if you're not utilizing your machines at 100% capacity or 80% capacity, which is probably more realistic, and you're somewhere around 40 to 50, why would another machine make a difference if you're already not using what you have at your disposal? We have to be a little bit more, stretch our minds a little bit more. What do we have? What can we do with what we have? So, I challenge folks, when you go back to your workplaces, look at some of the workflows that directly affect you and ask yourself, what could we do differently? What could we do better? It is up to us to make things easier for ourselves to do our day-to-day work. We do not need to have a workflow that is difficult to get through to already process something that is very difficult to comprehend. Science and research, it is hard. We've been, working on it for, decades upon decades upon decades, and we're still not, we still don't have the level of visibility in every aspect of cancer, for example. There's so much effort that's going into all these different nodes of science and research that it's up to us to speak up and say, I think that we have a different solution that will allow us to get from A to B, and save 20% of our time. I truly believe we all have the power to do that. It does not just come from leadership. It comes from us. We are the ones that are working on those things. We know what works and what doesn't because we are touching it. So I, really challenge folks to, go back to your workplace, and it doesn't have to be science. Think about it, just a simple process. How can you alleviate things? How can you make things better? And those things will give you back the time to take on more activities. I truly believe that.
Yeah, it's a one of those things where you work at it and you make little incremental changes over time, and
exactly,
all of a sudden you get back how many hours, weeks, months of time to do the things that really impact the business or even your life, right?
100%. I couldn't agree more.
All right. With that, thanks for joining us, Oscar.
Episode 1. Look at that already. I appreciate it, Lawrence, and appreciate everybody that's going along this ride with us and wanting to listen more and hear more about what we're going to be doing. So I'm excited.
Thanks for listening, and if you're interested in being a guest on our show, send us a message at leanbydesign@sigmalabconsulting.com. You've been listening to the Lean by Design podcast. Music is by Alex Grohl and Anton Vlasov of Pixabay. The show is produced by Oscar Gonzalez and hosted by Oscar Gonzalez and Lawrence Wong of Sigma Lab Consulting. Until next time, work smarter before you work harder.
Where's my mouse?